there a problem. So I'm going to hit record now.
You've got the power. Absolutely. Okay.
Wait.
This conference will now be recorded.
There we go. All right, I'm going to call the board meeting to order. Can I have a roll call vote to open the meeting, please? We're going to start with John Ketchum.
John Ketchum, aye.
Mary?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Joe?
Joe McFarland, aye.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Harder, aye.
Robert?
Robert Doan, aye.
Catherine?
Catherine Green, aye.
Donna?
Kalanick, aye.
And David Nixon, aye. Okay, this is the part where we're going to have public comment. So, Robin, if you want to speak, and Carl, you can speak after Robin speaks. Go ahead.
Actually, Dave, I've got to read in that bit.
Oh, gosh. Go ahead, Jen. My apologies.
I just love this bit. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Community Preservation Committee on Thursday, March 11, 2021 at 6 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: on channel 18 or by watching the simulcast at http://harwich18.dyn-dns.org/cablecast/public/L for live ASPX ? Channel ID = 1. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite our best efforts, we will post on the Town of Harwich's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you, Jen. You're doing well. You've got it almost down to pat. Okay, moving on. Public comment. Who would like to make a public comment? Robin?
I didn't know if you wanted Carl to go first or so. I just at the last meeting, I think there was maybe a little misunderstanding. So I did request for legal services through the Town of Harwich, through my commission. And so Stephen Connor wrote a letter to Joe Powers, and Joe kicked it back to us. And then I sent it back to Jan and an email, and she responded that maybe that you guys would be getting legal services because Joe said that it would have to come from your committee. But I just want to know that I did reach out to Joe and I did ask him for legal services.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
Okay.
Who else for open comment? Carl.
Okay.
Carl.
Thank you. My name is Carl Young, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Harwich United Methodist Church, and I'm also the historian there. And we are in support of the HT1 East Harwich Gravestone Project, which was approved on January 28th, 2021. The members of the church have signed a letter of support in your packet. we agreed to allow work to be done on our property and look forward to working in cooperation with the town of Harwich on this project.
Carl, thank you very much for your comments. As far as the process is concerned, Robin, we've taken our votes. They've already gone forward. So package your information again, bring it back to the board next year. So moving forward, approval of the minutes from January 4th, 14th. Can I have a motion, please?
I move we approve the minutes of January 14th, 2021.
Second.
You're muted, Dave.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, a roll call vote, please. John.
John Ketchum, aye.
Mary.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Joe.
Joe, aye.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Harder, aye.
Robert.
Robert Doan, aye.
Kathy.
Catherine Green, aye.
Donna.
Donna Kellenick, aye.
And David's aye. David Nixon, aye. Okay, now, can I have a motion for January 28th, 2021?
I move to approve the minutes for January 28th, 2021.
Is there a second?
I'll second. And then Jan, there was an email late this afternoon. Are they up to date now, the ones? Okay, in that case, I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. We're going to start with Donna.
Donna Kellenick, aye.
Kathy.
Catherine Green, aye.
Joe.
Joe McFarland, aye.
Robert.
Robert Doan, aye.
Mary.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
John.
John Ketchum, aye.
And David Nixon, aye. Thank you. Okay, everybody's got the, I'm sorry, Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Harder, aye.
Okay.
Okay, can we go into the next thing is the new business? Discussion of the grant agreements. So you know, I've already packaged the articles. And this year, the town administrator has taken the responsibility of writing the articles. The TA and I have had a conversation about certain language that needs to be in those articles. So he's going to write them up, go look at the legalese, submit them to council, bounce them back to us to review, and then send them to the Board of Selectmen. So I just wanted you to have that background information. Next thing is the discussion of the grants. Donna, I'm going to let you lead with this one. This is a particular grant I think we really need to get into the weeds on. And you've got the background experience. Go ahead, you've got the floor.
David, can I ask you a question? Are all the grant agreements from September of 2020 executed now?
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, all of the outside entities, Harwich Housing Authority. Okay, great. Because I don't think we saw all of those. I guess that's where I'm going with this. I know there is a new process in place, and I believe we gave you the authority to sign them as the chair. But it's not that I don't trust you. I just think like,
but I don't trust you.
No, that's not it. It's that if you're asking our opinion on what should be in the grant agreements, then we should see those grant agreements. I guess is my point.
Absolutely.
So, you know, about a year ago, David, you had asked me to do some research for you about how the surrounding towns handle grant agreements, which I did. And I'm happy to re-email you that packet of information. It's like 118 pages, and it has, you know, it tells you what towns require in-house and outside grant agreements. And then there were some sample grant agreements from some of those towns in it. And it was kind of a 50-50 split, I'd say, of the towns who require both in-house and outside entity grant agreements of some form. For the, I mean, I think we're going to talk about the gravestone project. But I also think, like, in terms of what the housing trust reporting requirement is, you know, we might want to think about what really needs to go into the veterans allocation. I mean, I understand it's $15,000, but, like, for instance, I think we should require that ultimately we get to see the deed restriction. So let's just go back to the cemetery, and it's great that there was a representative here to say that they support this project. I think the issue that we still have is the issue of liability. You know, my understanding is that there's not going to be a grant agreement unless we decide to put one in place, because it's essentially a town managed project, but it's a town managed project on land that the town does not own, which I think is different than a town managed project on town property that's also insured by the town. And even though ultimately when they go out to bid for this, they're going to require certificates of insurance and all of that stuff that's required, OSHA certification, all of that from the contractor. If something happens while that project is going on, whether it's, you know, the contractor, whether it's somebody who goes on the site while the work's being done, you know, ultimately who's going to be liable? And we all know that, you know, anyone who's involved, the church, the town, the cemetery commission, the contractor, you know, might have some liability there. And that's my concern. I have to look at, you know, our last grant agreement, or, you know, some type of indemnification clause, I think, is really needed here. And, you know, quite frankly, this might be beyond our ability. Between Mary and I, we do have some background in, you know, the municipal world and dealing with contracts and stuff. But ultimately, like, this is the type of thing, if I were handling it in the town I work on, it would go to legal counsel. That wouldn't even be a question for me. And so I guess, you know, I mean, you have past precedents. I've only been a member for 2 years, about how, you know, how you do your grant agreements, how you do your applications and your awards. But you know, I think it's something that we need to think about. I can tell you, just sort of as a side story, that, you know, as you know, I work for, not with, CPC in the town of Brewster, and they're really struggling with their grant agreement for the Pleasant Bay Boating Award. because our legal counsel wants it to say somewhere that there'll be some type of signage or something that ensures that there's public access to the site, because that's one of the requirements of the CPA law. So, you know, we may end up with, and I'm telling you this because Harwich gave money, that we may end up with a sign at that location that, you know, talks about the different towns funding it, and in connection to that says something about public access. So, I mean, I realize every town is different, and the level to which, you know, you want to get into some of these issues is really up to the town of Harwich and the CPC committee. But, you know, those are my concerns.
John, I have a question. When you said legal counsel, were you speaking of CPC legal counsel or the town legal counsel?
No, as you know, David, I've shared with you that in the town of Brewster, every application that comes into the CPC committee is sent to town legal counsel to opine whether or not it's CPC eligible and what type of you know, restrictions or guidelines they would want to have around it. And I'll be honest with you that the town of Brewster did not always do that. And probably going back about 4 or 5 years ago, we had an issue with the CPC award. And from that time on, we had a legal issue. And from that time on, it was decided that all applications were to be reviewed by town council. And actually, town council does all the grant agreements as well. So
Copeland and Page?
Yes. Well, yeah, KP Law. Now they're called KP Law now. That's much more fresh. I'm sorry, I had to put a little humor. I know you all think I'm way too serious because this is what I do for a living.
I got it. All right, Donna, thank you. Mary.
Thanks, David. You know, I agree with everything Donna just said as far as the grant agreements are concerned. You know, there is a difference when there are third parties involved versus just the CPC and the town. As far as liability is concerned. So, you know, I do think those are all things that should be reviewed by town council. And again, we set money aside for administrative costs, including legal bills last year and this year. And that's one of the reasons that I felt it was important to do that, because we need those funds in order to be able to make sure we're covered. You know, I do think there, one point that Donna made was that, you know, the town will get certificates of insurance. All that does is show that there's insurance on the property. It doesn't divide up liability. It doesn't indemnify the town for the contractor's work or for defects that may occur in the workmanship or on the land or anything else. You know, if somebody trips in a hole and breaks their ankle, it's a whole different situation. So the grant agreements are important, particularly for those types of situations where it's not just the town and CPC itself, but third parties and land that's not owned by the town. So I think it's important.
Okay, just a little background. When the rec built the fields behind the community center, we made sure that, well, the town made sure that every one of those contractors working on that project had a certificate of liability that indemnified the town itself, where in other cases it wouldn't.
So a certificate of insurance with an additional insured for a certain limit is partially what you're looking for. There's also issues as far as liability is concerned. You can also do it in a contract as well.
Okay, so if we're going to go this far, let's get into the posting bond issue.
So those are all things that council should be telling us what should be done. You bond, right? You insure against tort liability, you bond against contract liability. So they're two different situations.
Okay.
Insurance covers tort liability, the slip, the fall, the negligence.
Right.
Bonds would insure against, bad performance or not performing a contract.
Right. And the procurement laws are going to dictate what type of bond you need you can ask for more, right? Like, so, but I believe that they're only cleaning the stones, right? Right, Robin? They're not, no, they are gonna touch ground. That's my point. They're gonna, so if they are touching ground, then it's public works. And if it's over $50,000, they have to go out to full bid, and they have to require the payment and performance bonds. But like Mary said, that isn't about liability. That's about them doing the job that they're supposed to do, that they're being contracted to do.
Thank you.
And you'll have to set out whether it's a certificate of insurance that they have liability insurance, or whether the town or the CPC or the church or whoever else is an additional insured, so that the premium will cover any liability against the town or another third entity.
Okay, not that I'm hammering you two, but I need to ask more questions. When it comes down to the actually implementation of the contract, who handles that within the town?
Well, David, you and I have had this conversation before. We are not, CPC doesn't sign contracts.
This isn't for me and you. This is for the board to understand. Okay.
Right, I understand. The CPC is not the contract signing authority for the town of Harwich. That's the Board of Selectmen. And when it's been delegated under certain limits to the town administrator. So, it's entirely possible that we may want separate counsel, and the town may need town council to review the grant agreement in certain circumstances. So.
Okay, Donna and Mary, both this question to you. The CPC has its own standardized agreements. Do either one of you have those agreements?
Does what?
The CPC has standardized agreements.
Yeah.
So, do either of you in your job working for the town use any of those agreements?
Yeah, I do. I am the administrative person who's assigned to the CPC committee. So, but like I said, we have a different process, and legal counsel reviews the applications, and then they also review the grant agreements. But the CPC chair, myself, or the town administrator, and legal counsel all work together to execute those agreements. Our signature process is different. It's signed by the CPC chair, the other entity, and the town administrator, and it's certified for funding by the town accountant, because that's required under Mass General Law. But, I think, David, and I think Mary tried to say this, that, I really think whether it's the town council that you already have in place or a different council, in our case, it's our regular town council, somebody needs to be involved in this process where these situations are not as clearly defined as we're putting up lights at Brooks Park. We own that property. where, you know, there's nobody else involved. It's the town with their standard contracts going through the procurement process. It's town-owned land that's insured by the town's insurer. I mean, one of the other things that I do for the town is I do all the town insurance. And if there's ever a situation like this, I run it through the insurance company and say, tell me exactly what it is you need me to get in order to make sure the town is covered.
John is 100% right.
But this is you're a volunteer committee.
Dottie, you're very proactive. I understand. This is an informational for all the board members.
Okay.
Different point of view. That's all. We're all trying to get to the same place. So, Kathy Green.
No comment.
Joe McFarland.
I'm good with all the discussion that's been said. It's really above my pay grade what you're talking about, but it just sounds like we have to get the attorney involved for all of this.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever we approve, it just sounds to me like it has to be on condition that all legal requirements are met, because you don't want the church or the town to get sued. You know, that would be ruinous. So it sounds to me like whatever the grant agreement states has to state clearly that there is the proper liability insurance.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of the concepts that were brought up tonight about, having legal check all of the applications in the first place. That sounds interesting. I don't know. I guess we as a committee decide that. But definitely, I think we should be having these grant agreements with everybody, other than the ones we've carved out as just being town on town property. I don't know if that's any different than we're already doing now, though. I mean, I understood we're already doing the grant agreements for anybody that's involved in a third party. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So are we going beyond that for every agreement, or are we just saying we have to put more guidelines of how we proceed and do this?
That's what the board discussion is right now, Bob.
David, if I may.
Hold on for 1 second, Mary. Let me get John, then I'll come back to you. John, go ahead.
Yeah, so I more or less agree with Joe. This is pretty much above my pay grade. However, I do have a couple questions. Hopefully clarifying things for me a little bit. And the questions are both specific to the graveyard project, the gravestone project, and since Donna brought it up, the PBCB project. And so it's a similar question for both. That is, today, what happens if a Harwich town employee is involved in an incident on church property while, say, mowing the graveyard, and somebody is injured who is not a town employee on church property, but involving a machine that belongs to the town of Harwich and an employee of the town of Harwich? Isn't that a similar concern, except there's not a third-party contractor? So just the other part of that question is a similar thing. Donna's saying that she's bringing up the fact that public access is required where CPC funds are applied. And so there's probably going to be basically an invitation to the public to go out on the newly renovated dock at PBCD, which is, it's in the town of Orleans, I think, but somebody could also end up in the town of Brewster there. But what happens now? How is the potential, and there's sort of more immediate potential in some ways for a liability-inducing incident happening on a dock on Pleasant Bay. So how is that covered now? Those are my questions.
Mary, go ahead.
So first I wanted to get back to Bob Jones' point. I don't think we're necessarily doing anything different this year than last year, with the exception that the town, where the cemetery commission was working on graveyards before they were town cemeteries. This one isn't town-owned land. So I think that's where Donna was coming from and saying, you know, this is something that's different. John, to your point with respect to Pleasant Bay, you know, anybody can sue anybody at any time, right? But the difference, I think, between the cemetery project and Pleasant Bay is that the cemetery is the town also doing the work, contracting the work, whereas Pleasant Bay is its own nonprofit contracting its own work, and it's not on town land either. So, you know, we're contributing to the financing, but we have the town has no semblance and control over the project itself. Just kind of to Donna's point, you know, if they're using town money, town CPC money, it should provide additional public access under the CPA Act. So, you know, could somebody, if it's a faulty dock that's built or a faulty float that's built and somebody trips and falls and hurts themselves, could Harwich CPC in the town of Harwich get sued because we contributed to it? Sure, but somebody would have to prove that we had some causal faults there. We're not managing the project. Cemetery Commission's managing the project on somebody else's land. So just different situations, I think. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. It leaves the first part of the question, though, about how liability today is dealt with for maintenance of the cemetery at Methodist.
I mean, Robin, maybe you know, is there any kind of formal agreement that the Cemetery Commission has in place with these cemeteries that you maintain that are not town-owned?
There is not a formal agreement that I'm aware of. I know that in 1970, I'm not sure the year when the legislation was passed, a lot of the cemeteries, we also do the West Harwich Baptist Church Cemetery, which that church is for sale right now. We've been maintaining that one as well. There's, you know, a few smaller parcels that we're maintaining. Maybe I can check into legal counsel on those ones as well.
I mean, I'm sure in the 1970s when this law was put into place, people, and, you know, it sounded like when Selectman Howell was here that it was sort of a nice little agreement, we'll give you this and you'll do this. But it was nothing that was ever formalized. And honestly, I don't know whether or not you need a formal agreement, but if one of the town of Harwich employees was working at this cemetery, and let's say they were using a mower and they cut their arm and they had to go to get care, in my mind, that would go through the town's workers' comp. That's different than if an action by the church, let's say, I don't know, the church left a giant hoe sitting out there that nobody could see, and somebody walked into it and smacked themselves. Like, you know, there's so many different variables that can occur. And that's typically why we have agreements or certificates of insurance or things formalized in writing so that you're protecting yourself to the extent that you can possible, right? And just back to Bob's point, like Mary said, the reason this was brought up is because in a normal circumstance, this is a project that's being sponsored by the town, and we wouldn't have a grant agreement in place. So the first question the CPC has to answer is whether or not they're going to apply a different standard to this project, even though the applicant is the town of Harwich, because it's not taking place on town-owned land.
I actually agree and think there should be an agreement in place with you, and I'm not against that at all. So I'm hoping that we do get a grant agreement just so that everyone's covered. So I'm not against a grant agreement by any, and I wanted legal counsel. Joe told me that I couldn't ask for it, so.
And for everybody's, this is where the town administrator and I disagree. It's not the CPC project. The project belongs to a department head in the town of Harwich. And in order for that process to go forward, that information is to be provided to the CPC for the CPC to determine whether or not the project qualifies. So it goes back to a discussion between the chair and the town administrator again. And I will have that discussion with him, Robin. But Robin, I'm putting the emphasis of this process on you. You're the department head. You're the one coming forward with the project. I don't know if you have direct access to town council or you have to go through the town administrator.
No, we don't have direct contact with it. We have to put in, we have to request for legal counsel for an opinion through our town administrator, and then he allows us to access him. And he told me that I could not. So I did try to do the process.
Done.
Well, David, I would just suggest in your discussion with the town administrator that, you talk about what the process should be moving forward for review of applications and questions that the CPC has. And to Mary's point about putting money in the administrative fund. So when these reviews are done in the town that I work for, they're paid for out of CPC funding. They're not paid for out of general legal. And so, I mean, I don't know if there's a concern about the legal budget. I know that, things are tight right now. I don't know if that's part of it or not, but there are going to be situations like this where we would be better served with some legal counsel involved, however that process is. And it is very common. I do, because I'm the assistant town administrator, have access to legal counsel, but my department heads do not. They have to go through administration to get access to legal counsel. However, in the CPC case, it is agreed between administration and the CPC that this is the process for having applications reviewed and having grant agreements done.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to take this to the next step. I've already been down this road before with independent counsel for CPC. I'm going to ask you this directly. So the town of Brewster gets reimbursed for information it gets from legal counsel pertaining to CPC.
So our process is a little different. All of the legal bills that are related to CPC are paid through the CPC committee. So the CPC committee approves any legal expenditures using CPC funds.
Yeah, but that's not what I asked on.
So there's not a reimbursement process. The legal bill comes in, all of the charges that are related to CPC are on the legal bill, and CPC approves those charges and they're paid out of CPC funds directly.
Okay, so is the procurement for the town, or does the legal part of this come from the CPC? Does the CPC have their own attorney?
No, the CPC is the same legal counsel that the town does.
Okay.
And just so we're not confused, we're talking about two different things, grant agreements versus contracts and procurement. I mean, contracts and procurement, that goes, through, if it's a town project, it's going through the town process. But legal opinions and grant agreements related to CPC applications come from CPC funding. And actually, what the CPC does now is they allocate a certain amount of administrative funding with each project that they approve to handle some of the legal expenses that might come with it. Like in a very complicated situation, which you may find yourselves in down the road, the Housing Trust puts in an application for development, and you have to have a deed restriction in the agreement. You have to have legal counsel involved in that. You can't, it's something you cannot do with on your.
The handicap is this entrance to the furthest right?
That's right.
Coming in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please mute caller one, whoever that is.
I don't know if they're gonna let him down there though. They can, I mean.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Donna. I lost, I tried to figure out a mechanism to shut that mic off, but.
That was Joe, and I muted Joe, so Joe will have to probably do *6 when he wants to talk.
Okay. All right, so Donna, Mary, Kathy, you've already chimed in on this. Robert, anything else?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Joe, John, myself. There's a lot to consider. And I understand what Donna's point is with the trust, because I can see that not happening in the very near future. But I don't know if we necessarily need to get into hiring an attorney or hiring the town attorney. I just have a fundamental problem with that.
David?
It is the town attorney. Go ahead, Mary.
Lawyers, you need to let the lawyers do the lawyer work. And the lawyers should be looking at the contracts before they get signed. And I personally think Donna's process is correct, that if it's a CPC agreement, then CPC funds probably should be paying for that legal counsel to finalize those contracts.
I understand what both of you are saying. What I'm trying to say to you is, if we're going to go in this direction, that'll be up to the board to decide. I personally would like a separate attorney than the town of Harwich.
But David, we are the town of Harwich. We can, the only time we would not need separate counsel is if we were trying to be adversarial to the town. And I don't believe we are. Do I think I think the Housing Trust is going to have a separate counsel? Because I think they probably should.
Mary, that may be true now, but that's not the history of the past. Anyway, we can agree to disagree.
I'll let those in the right pay grade make those decisions then.
Okay, is there anybody else on the subject? Donna, go ahead.
Just one last thing. So, I mean, let me give you an example. You know, we are doing an affordable housing project. There are multiple partners involved. There's a 40B comprehensive permit involved. There's a CPC agreement involved that's had to be amended twice. And in that case, having one legal counsel handle each of those components is just so much better of an outcome because they've been involved in the process since day one, and they understand all of the different things that are happening. This is a real live thing that's happening in my world right now. CPC amendment twice, comprehensive permit had to be amended twice. All of these things are working together because it's town funding, it's state funding, it's complicated. And, you know, maybe you haven't had to deal with that yet, but I think you are going to have more complex issues coming down the road for you. And so whatever process you put in place now, you just want to think about what that process looks like, because it's going to be the process you use going forward. And I'm not advocating that your process is perfect. I'm just telling you, we got a lot of boots and straps and suspenders in place for a good reason, because we had something bad happen. And typically that's when you decide that you need to go down a different path than you are. So no one was doing anything wrong. It just got into situations that were more complex than, you know, a CPC application where we pay for a fence to be put up at a field that we own.
Understood. Interesting discussion. Does anybody on the board, do we want to pursue this further? That would be the question. So, Bob.
I would, first of all, I think it's a little unclear to me exactly what our position is now. Do we have that in a document somewhere that says exactly what the procedure is and who gets them? Or has it just kind of been tradition?
For the last, since I've been chair, the finance director has written the grant agreements for the town of Harwich.
But do they then select who gets them and who doesn't?
That information goes to legal automatically.
So the CPC doesn't have responsibility for determining who should get a grant agreement?
We can set the guidelines.
Okay.
And we have done that.
And do we have those guidelines written right now that are available?
No, they're not.
Well, I think that's the first step.
So
I'm confused.
The question is it a policy? It's not a policy.
I mean, I think that's the first step, is to write a document that we all can agree and understand, because I'm kind of confused now on what we do and what we don't do. And I mean, I've heard some good ideas tonight, and I don't know whether they're good to adopt or not. They sound pretty good.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Let's go around the table again. Anybody else have any comment? Would any of you like to be a participant in designing a written policy for the Harwich CPC and how it handles this particular subject? Come on, folks, I'm putting you all right on the spot.
No, I mean, the thing that I was going to say is the first thing I think needs to happen is that you do need to have a conversation with the town administrator, because we're talking about two things right now. We're talking about this particular project, which I think we agree needs to have some eyes on it and needs to have a grant agreement. And then we're talking about what do we want to do for the long term. So I think, David, that you need to have a discussion with administration, and then after you've had that discussion, then we can talk about some guidelines and what those guidelines need, might need to say. And, I'm sure between Mary and I, we could come up with guidelines, but they need to be informed by the town of Harwich, because like Mary said, we're not a separate entity. We're a committee of the town of Harwich that has fiduciary responsibilities, but those agreements are ultimately signed by the Board of Selectmen, which is new, right? I mean, isn't that new, David?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that's not formalized in writing either.
No, there's no policy in place.
Correct.
So I understand exactly what you're saying. Donna, would you, and Mary, would you be willing to send me bullet points to have a discussion with the TA?
Sure.
Yes, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Bob.
And Donna, do you have a policy in Brewster, a written policy that we could see? Or know of other CPCs that do?
Yeah, so I think it would be good to bring back as I started in the beginning, that whole document that I had created a year ago, and it was like right before COVID happened, and we were actually going to have this discussion a year ago about what other, I did some research for David about, so yeah, I think we could bring that back as well. Yeah.
Was that actually sent to us at the time?
No, it was sent to David, and it was in February, and then literally.
Okay.
Things fell apart.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss an email somewhere.
No.
Elizabeth.
I just had since I'm new to all this, it seems like we're discussing now two different issues. One is apparently there are no procedures in place for the CPC, legally speaking, that probably needs to be addressed. It sounds like Donna's got that. In the case of the cemetery question, I do not understand why we're just approving the grant and pointing out that it seems like it has a problem in terms of liability. I don't see why our funds would have to be used to pay for the legal opinion, and why that shouldn't come out of the town's legal budget, not our committee. That's what I don't get.
Elizabeth, if you're asking the chair, I won't answer that question. I don't know. Mary, do you have any background on what Elizabeth just said?
So, it's the CPA has a provision for administrative costs, and some of our administrative costs are legal fees. And if we want a contract, then I would probably argue that Brewster is doing it a proper way and having CPA funds pay for the legal contracting costs for the CPA agreements. Even
if we're not the ones signing the contract.
But it's still relative to the CPA. It's still relative to the CPC. We are a sub-entity of the town of Harwich, without a doubt. But we have funds to use, and one of the provisions for our funds is to use, is to have administrative costs expended out of the CPA. So I think it's a perfectly valid expenditure for CPA funds.
Okay, thanks.
Elizabeth, just to give you a little insight, if a department head goes to the town and asks for a legal opinion, and the town won't grant that to the department head, that should pretty much tell you what's happening. So, anybody else? We'll start again. John Ketchum.
Yeah, I just have to say what Mary just said makes complete sense to me. I don't understand why costs that are induced by grants that we make shouldn't be paid out of our funds. That seems completely sensible to me. I mean, otherwise they come out of some other pot that comes from normal tax revenues that aren't part of the CPA revenues. So I'm very comfortable with that position, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
Joe.
Again, I don't really have an opinion on this.
Okay, I wish I didn't, Joe. All right, Kathy.
I sort of agree with Elizabeth. I just think that when an applicant comes to us, they should, have some of these things in place. We've been doing this long enough, and for the most part, we have the same applicants coming back to us year after year. They know the kind of questions we ask, they know the responsibilities, and I just think that some of this stuff that's come up time and time again should be taken care of before the application comes in. Then we wouldn't have to go through all this. That's all.
Okay. Again, if Donna, when you have a chance, and Mary, when you have a chance, would you please send me some bullet points, and I'll have a discussion with the TA, and I will come back and report to the committee that discussion. So, damn. My other computer has died. Okay, here we go. All right, to continue on in new business, vote to continue the membership of the Community Preservation Committee annual dues, $4,350. Can I have a motion, please?
David?
Mary?
I move that we vote to continue our membership with the Community Preservation Coalition and approve the payment of annual dues of $4,350 out of our 2022 anticipated revenues under a designated fund.
Second.
So there's a motion and a second. I'm going to take any discussion. Elizabeth.
Sorry, just because I'm new, what do they do for us that's worth $4,000?
Any information that you need to glean from the act, they will provide for you. We're going to use their services on the next go-to meeting that we have with the chairman. I've accessed their services any number of times for applications. Any questions that the board has comes through the chair, and the chair can submit them. So,
I wasn't denigrating nor commending. I was just curious. So thanks.
I understand. Mary.
So Elizabeth, think of it as the CPC's equivalent of the Mass Municipal Association. It's the CPC committee's back, essentially.
Donna?
Yeah, Elizabeth, if you've never been on their website, there is so much information on there. Technical assistance, guidelines, even they have, sample grant agreements. They work with the Department of Local Services at the Mass DOR, who is actually the fiduciary side of the CPC from the state. But Mary, why isn't that being paid out of administrative funds? So I'm just going back to the discussion we just had. I'm just curious.
You're 100% right. It should be out of the administrative fund.
Okay.
I had my chart open, Donna. That's all. It's been a long day.
Do you want to amend?
So can I amend I'd like to amend my motion that we pay $4,350 out of this Harwich CPC administrative account.
And I will amend the second.
There we go. So we have a second on the floor. Any discussion?
So, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
John.
Okay, got it.
Go ahead.
So this is not a separate budget item now. It's not being taken out as a separate item. It's being taken out of funds that we have already allocated and voted on to allocate to the administrative fund.
That's correct. In the administrative fund, right. Kathy.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that one of the biggest jobs that the coalition does is lobbying at the state legislature.
And that's a considerable point. Absolutely. That's where all that extra money comes from. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. I'm going to take a roll call vote.
Before you do that, Dave,
Go ahead.
I just want to reread the fully amended. I just want to make sure, Mary, that we're on the same page.
Let me redo it then, Jan. So I move that we vote to continue our membership with the Community Preservation Coalition and pay annual dues in the amount of $4,350 from the Harwich CPC Administrative Fund.
$4,350 out of the Harwich CPC Administrative or Admin account?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And Elizabeth seconded.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay, roll call vote. We'll start with Donna.
Donna Kalanick, aye.
Kathy.
Catherine Green, aye.
Joe.
Joe McClellan, aye.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Harder, aye.
Robert.
Robert Doan, aye.
Mary.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
John.
John Ketchum, aye.
David Nixon, aye. Thank you very much for your vote. Okay. Under old business, website updates. John, have you talked to Caleb about the issue with the who's in control of the session? Has that finally been settled out? I know that you got it tonight. I understand that whole thing, but
Well, really, it's not a Caleb issue. I mean, there were issues last time. I didn't log in, and that was the main issue last time. And honestly, I thought I had it straightened out before the last time because I took time to talk to Jamie about it, but there was something lost in translation there. Mary straightened me out this evening, so I think I'm all set at this point. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you,
You're
John.
welcome, John.
Okay, follow-up for the committee certificates of completion on the conflict of interest laws. have all the members gone to their prospective chairs and submitted the information to them?
So Bob, Joan, and I will get ours taken care of. Don't worry. I'm on
Okay.
it.
Okay, but in the process, for you two specifically, please check to see what your term is and if it's correct. It should mirror whatever board you represent. And they're supposed to be staggered. Bob, go ahead.
So in my case, it says it ended last year.
Right.
So I don't know what that means.
You're okay, and Mary can back me up on this. Go ahead, Mary, I'll let you take it. I got the answer. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so you're okay anyway, but we did revote you last year, and we did send it to the selectmen, and I think the selectmen did revote you last year, so I think maybe it just didn't get updated.
Okay.
That's my guess, but you'd be okay anyway until your successor is duly
Right.
qualified. So if we haven't put somebody in your slot, you're still on the historic commission, so you're still fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mary. Okay, I'm going to ask individuals. We'll start with John Ketchum. Have you supplied your ethics to your chair?
Well, I filled out the ethics. I took the ethics online thing and got the certificate and signed the form for CPC and submitted it. And I sent it to Jan, but I also confirmed that with Anita that she had it, and that's all taken care of.
Okay.
And the rest of the the term stuff you're aware of, I think, at this point, Dave. So I think we're all set.
All righty. Elizabeth.
So I did the ethics thing. I did it twice. I did both tests because I didn't know which was for Assembly of Delegates, which was for this. So I just took the test twice. But I do have a problem in that I am on the Housing Authority until 25. But according to this, my appointment to this committee expires in June. So I don't know if I have to get reappointed by the Housing Authority in June is that yearly that this seat comes up in June?
Elizabeth, that's why I want you to contact your chair, provide the ethics information for your chair, and ask your chair to call town hall and to find out what your status is.
Yeah, because I asked her and she said I'm good through 25. So but she's new to the Housing Authority, so maybe she doesn't know. So I guess maybe I should call. Who would I call at town hall to find? I mean, some Patty, I think her name was, from town hall, called me to ask when I'm off all these committees, and I told her what I knew. But I mean, so that's the thing. I'm very confused, as it seems to be is everyone involved in me. So.
Oh, again, I'm just following. I understand on the board you sit on, Elizabeth, but the proper procedure is for you to talk to your chair and let your chair do it.
Okay. All righty. That's what I'll do. But I did do it. So.
No problem. Joe.
Yeah, I filled out both of them. I sent it to Jan and she forwarded them for me a while ago.
Okay. Do you know what your expiration date is, Joe?
Yeah, I believe it's another year, and I just heard what you said, so I'll check with Art Bowden about that this week.
Okay, thank you. Kathy.
I completed the testing and signed the form and sent it into the town clerk's office per their request. And my appointment is up this June because I was fulfilling a vacated space.
Okay, thank you. Bob, did I get you already? Okay, Donna.
I completed the task, signed the form. I sent both to Jan. My appointment is through the Board of Selectmen, and the appointment expiration date is correct.
Okay. Thank you all for taking that task on and completing it. I appreciate it.
Francisco. Dave?
Yes.
Just for the members that did send me their material, Joe, Donna, or somebody else. I think John, yep. I did send those right on, just so you know. And then this whole thing became where we're supposed to send it to the chair people, but I did send on your documents, just so you know.
So
Bob.
It's John. I'm
sorry.
I did the ethics form for CPC. I did not discuss the ethics piece with the chair of the Conservation Commission. I only contacted them to verify the term of my appointment. So it's a little different from what you're saying. I don't know if that has any material relevance, but I'm not sure why I need to go through them about the ethics business. I assume that taking the ethics test once suffices for both committees. I don't have to learn the same thing all over again for another committee, I assume.
That's correct, but the town clerk and I have a different point of view about the ethics exam. It's up to the chairs of every of the committees that you represent to make sure their people do the ethics exam. It's a courtesy to the chair of the CPC that you all have done that exam. But it's up to the board, it's up to the chairman of those committees to take on that responsibility. That's theirs.
David doesn't want to take on the responsibility of sending the certificates.
And I get it. So, and the other thing is, some of the documentation that I have, as far as your terms are concerned, are totally different than what the town, two different documents of the town. And I'm trying to get it corrected. Your terms should reflect what your terms are from the committee that you're ex-official you represent. So if your board says you're on the committee for 3 years, that particular committee, and then you're ex-official to the CPC, the CPC should be a 3-year commitment, and it should be staggered with all of us. That's the way it's written. That's the way the documentation reads. And that comes from the charter. So, Donna, go ahead.
Well, so in my case, I sent it to Jan and you because I consider you the chair of the committee I'm on, because I'm not on the Board of Selectmen. I'm appointed by the Board of Selectmen, but I'm not on the Board of Selectmen. So for the purposes of this exercise, you and you only are the chair of the committee that I'm on. So that's why I sent it to Jan and to you. Just to be clear, because I don't sit on another committee that's sending me to your committee. So you're my chair, David. You don't appoint me, but you're my chair.
And I understand. And I would return that, but I'm not gonna. Okay, understood. And you're correct on it. You're right. So that takes care of that. Is there anything else? Again, my computer has died. Jan, can you go over the date for the next meeting, please?
Our next meeting is the 24th of February, and it's for a 30-minute presentation by Stu Saginaw, I think is how I say his name. He's the executive director of the Community Preservation Coalition. And this is all on Bonding 101 for CPA. And I did get Donna your email last night saying that you're now not available. And since it's a presentation,
we still have
it's
to have.
unfortunate, but we still have quorum.
Right after, believe it or not, right after I sent you that email, the school committee was not ready to present its budget on the 24th, so that got punted to the 10th. So now I'm back available on the 24th. And is there going to be a Q&A time for that? So after he presents? Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I'm going to ask him, do you recommend, if you're going to bond, that you have legal counsel to do it? I'm sorry, David.
No, you're no problem. My thoughts were that we could look at the project from Brooks Park, and we could bond that project because of the numbers that are involved. But after talking with the TA and the finance director, I kind of back away from that. And I still think that for the board, for the members of the board, the bonding part of CPC is very important, and it can be a lifeline for CPC and the town because you can combine bonds. So, and I'm thinking more of the down the road to the trust. You know, I've made a statement before that, as Mary would say, we took a leap of faith. We gave the town $1 million, $1.2 million. And for a $10 million project, 10% down with any bank in my world is a done deal. Bonding is different. I've learned a lot about it. We should have some background for it in case the issue comes up. So that's why I went to this extent to invite him to the board. And yes, you will be, once he makes his presentation, he's more than happy to answer any questions that we have. So I hope you all can attend to that. All right, is there anything else? Any other requests? Jen?
Do we want to plan the March meeting? The date? Just the date? Or not?
How about if we look at we'll take it under advisement.
Okay.
So take a look at your calendars, folks. See what you come up with. And in our next discussion, our next meeting, we'll plan our dates. And hopefully we'll all be vaccinated by then. John, go ahead.
Do you want me to post information on approved projects on the website?
You can provide that information now, yes. And again, John has he's done his due diligence. He did a hell of a job putting a spreadsheet together for us. But I want to remind all of you, these numbers tend to be fluid, depending on how the state looks at things, the DOR certification, there's a lot involved. And the percentages that the town gets from the state for CPC, other than the 3%, it's a moving target. Just understand that. But John has a good basis to go off of. So yes.
So I was asking a slightly different question, which is just, I wasn't proposing to post the spreadsheet on the website or the
website. No, I thought you were talking about to the committee.
Well, that's the other question. One is, do we want to make public on the CPC, Harwich CPC webpage, the projects that have been approved? The proposals are up there. the list of proposals are up there. I think last year I posted up there what the result of the proposals were up to this point in the process. I'm just asking if the committee wants me to do that again this year. And then the other question is, I think the spreadsheet is square now. The one change that happened tonight was that 4350 is no longer a separate item. It's not in the spreadsheet anymore. I just took it out. Other than that, I believe the thing is solid, and if the committee wants, I can share that with everyone. I just send it an email.
You can provide that to the committee.
Okay. What about the first question?
You can, it seemed to be a consensus of the board. You can post it.
John, I did up a quick sheet that says it gave all the projects that same sheet that gave the title, the amount of request, who's doing it, blah, blah, blah. And then I say whether it passed or not and the amount.
So it's a PDF.
Yeah.
It's sort of an unedited version of the thing you did when the post. Yeah, I can just post that. That makes my job.
And then that way, anybody wanting to know which projects passed or didn't and how much was allocated, it's all in a PDF.
Okay, so if you send me the PDF, I will put it up on the web.
Okay.
And I'll put some headline saying, you know, here's the result of the.
Dave, you know that document that I'm speaking of. Is that all right if that's done?
That's fine.
Okay.
Are the votes included on that document?
I can add the votes, but right now, this was a cheat sheet, and since our minutes hadn't been approved, it was just a cheat sheet. So if you want, I can put on the votes on this if you want.
Traditionally, the only place the votes show up is in the articles. And I'm not sure that's going to happen this year. We're under a whole different process. I've got to gather that information for you.
But the votes are in the minutes, which are also public documents. So
that's correct. I'm just following the bouncing ball as it's being laid out for me. So.
Or your name could be in the paper.
Oh, yeah, well, that works wonders. I've been down that road before. Anyway, is there anything else from the board? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote to adjourn. We'll start with, can I have a motion to adjourn? There we go.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. John?
Aye. John Ketchum, aye.
Mary?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Robert?
Robert Doan, aye.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Harder, aye.
Catherine?
Catherine Green, aye.
Donna?
Donna Kalanick, aye.
And David Nixon, aye. We'll see you next time, folks. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Good night.
Okay, this